Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take on this hump day, this Wednesday earnings season. We talked about it for the last week or so, looking forward to the tech earnings. Well, that's what we went into last night. But before we get to that, as we approach that, the markets were absolutely under fire. We take a look at the Dow. It was down over 200 plus points. It did have a midday and then a late day, kind of an ease back down towards those levels before actually rallying in the final hour by about 100 points. Still finished negative, but only down about 85 points, was down well over 200 points throughout the session. NASDAQ also just got hammered early on, down over 300 points at times. Final 90 minutes got off of some of those lows, started to push a little bit to the upside, but still down over 1%, down about 180 points yesterday. So the NASDAQ definitely taking it on the chin. Now that volatility index, obviously with the way the markets were moving, volatility index was moving as well. We did pop up over 20. We did pull back a little bit, but we finished the day up about 10%, just underneath 19.5 for the VIX. So up there pushing towards those 20s once again. And once again, how long can we sustain above that 20 level? And that's something we've been talking about for quite a while now. Volumes yesterday, a little bit better, picked up some, still very impressive, but not where we were. But almost 35 million contracts yesterday, 34.8 million contracts yesterday. It was Apple, it was Tesla, it was Baba, it was NVIDIA, it was NEO, it was AMD. All of these names definitely participating fairly well. Apple and Tesla were the standouts, over a million plus contracts yesterday. Crude hanging right around that 72 level. You got the 10-year, it's been hanging right near that 1.25 level. Sectors that were hit yesterday. Now, you see crude and you see this, and you start to look at, obviously, with technology being a huge influence on the NASDAQ. Technology, semiconductors, biotech, all participating to the downside yesterday, communications as well. And then when you look over at some of the other influential areas, you look at energy, you look at the consumer discretionary, and there was some pressure across the board there. UPS, for instance, yesterday, down 7%. That's a pretty extreme number. Activision was down a little bit, closer to 7% as well. Chinese names took a big hit yesterday. That's something that's reversing today. We'll get into that in just a minute. McDonald's was a little bit stronger, and we talked about this yesterday, but F5 Networks also stronger, up about 6% yesterday. So a pretty nice, significant move. Now, as we get into today, we go back to earnings last night and how they're affecting the markets today. So Apple crushed their numbers. Microsoft crushed their numbers. Google crushed their numbers. Google really trading very, very nicely today. When you take a look over at Google and you see where it's trading, last I looked, it was getting up. I think it was up more than 3%, close to 4%. But Apple was under a little bit of pressure. It sold off early. It started to bounce back a little bit. And then Microsoft was down a little bit and then started moving to the upside in positive territory. So not the movement that a lot of people maybe would have expected, but you got to remember what the moves were going into the numbers as well. But those numbers that they reported across the board, extremely strong. We still got a lot of names coming up in front of us. Facebook standing out the most for me, just because it's been such a long position for me to have on. And I also double up in this name where I've got actually calls and stock, just for full disclosure. So as we look at the markets today, we come in, the markets look a little bit quiet, although the NASDAQ was running pretty nicely. It was up about 65 points early on. The Dow really not doing a whole heck of a lot. Dow kind of fluctuated between up 20 or 40 points and down 20 or 40 points. Did go down well over 100 points not too terribly long ago, but it's come back off of those lows. On the other hand, NASDAQ was up about 60 or thereabouts, the pre-market up 40 or 50, 60 points. It got towards flat. Then last I looked, NASDAQ was screaming to the upside, up over 100 points. So a really nice performance today for the NASDAQ. And what are some of the contributors? Now, it's not really the names that you might expect. When you look at the NASDAQ today and you see some of what's really starting to press to the upside, the Chinese names very much stand out for me, because the same names that were getting hit yesterday, those are the names that are rallying today. Pinduoduo, and NetEase, JD, Baidu, Trip.com, all those kinds of names moving to the upside and being influential for sure. Chips starting to make a nice little bit of a turn to the upside. Communications, a nice turn to the upside. All of that contributing to what we are seeing with the NASDAQ up triple digits on a nice move. At least it was up triple digits the last I was looking. So I talked about earnings, but it wasn't just about technology. We had, well, you could call it a little technology. We had McDonald's as well. So you look over at McDonald's, those numbers looked extraordinary, but that stock, not as much. Stock was under some pressure, but McDonald's made a really nice, healthy run into the earnings itself. It was trading in the 230s. It got up not too distant from those 250 levels, and then it's pulling back today a little bit after that big run into the earnings. So earnings did look like some great numbers, however, when you look at their global as well as their same store in the US as well. Starbucks, kind of an interesting thing because they beat as well. They were very, very strong. They talked about labor shortage and some of the supply issues that they're facing, but their numbers itself that they delivered were very strong. That's another stock that was under pressure early. It was down about 2 or 3% to the downside. Google, as I mentioned, extremely strong. That ad rev, unbelievable. That's a stock that actually is performing very, very nicely today. Microsoft, as I say, starting to bounce a little bit as well. So we are seeing some movements for sure, and the absolute opposite movements that we have been seeing between the Dow and the NASDAQ coming back into play. That was something that was in play for a very long time, kind of left for a while, and it looks like it's back, at least for one day. Volatility, we're trading somewhere in the 19s, the upper 18s into the middle 19s, so we're not too distantly far from that 20 level of the VIX, and that's something that I think we're all going to keep an eye on, a very close eye on. Today, I will be on the halftime report. I'll also be on Fast Money tonight, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Look forward to that. But we've got a couple unusuals now that we'll use here. Obviously, won't be using those later on. So one area that hit early on that was really interesting for me was the number of different names in the pot stock world. And so the one that I selected was the first one that hit was ACB, Aurora Cannabis. Now this one is interesting because they had some pretty decent size. They also are expecting a move over the next couple of days. These expire July 30th. Stock was trading around 7.25. We had a buyer of 7,400 of the 7.5 calls. Those were only going for about 15 cents. So risk reward, not a whole lot of risk if there is some reward, if the stock can make a breakout in the next couple of days to the upside. So that's something. And then the hitting, the domino effect throughout that industry, just bullish paper hitting throughout many of those various names, including Tilray and others. So that stood out. Activision, very first stock today that hit on the unusual option activity. It took off almost immediately. Stock was trading right around 85.80. We had a buyer of 2,200 of the July. Again, that's Friday, of course, expiring. The 86s. So they're buying just basically an at-the-money call. The 86s just looking for any kind of move to the upside. Already gotten some of that move. They bought 2,200 of those. They paid anywhere between 90 cents up to about $1.35. So both of those two stood out for me. The Activision has made a very prominent move right away. The second that these options were bought, stock started moving to the upside. So I just want to be conscious of that as well. We'll have plenty more. We've got the halftime report coming up. We'll have unusual option activity. Be talking about Apple and Microsoft and everything else, along with what's coming up in terms of the earnings tonight as well. Folks, have a great day of trading. Oh, and by the way, today, just at the close, Bill Johnson and myself will be giving a webinar, which ought to be a lot of fun. You should sign up for this. This is going to be great. It's the favorite strategies that we have in these uncertain times. We say uncertain times just because earnings, the Fed, what's the Fed going to say today? As a matter of fact, all of the different elements that go into the markets themselves. We've seen the ups, we've seen the downs, we've seen Bitcoin at 60,000, we've seen it under 30,000, and today trading right around 40,000. There's a lot of different elements going into the trading world right now in these markets, and Bill Johnson and I will do our very best to try to help you navigate through that. That's today, right at the bell. Have a great day of trading.